I was sitting by the floor-to-ceiling window of my apartment, the city lights stretching endlessly below me, when my phone buzzed again. Another notification from my parents. My thumb hovered over the screen, heart tightening despite the calm facade I wore every day. I wore my favorite silk blouse, soft against my skin, a gentle reminder that I had built a life worth living, even if they didn't realize it. The message was short, sharp, and unmistakably accusatory. "Why did you stop paying the mortgage? That house belongs to the family." I let out a slow, controlled sigh, staring out at the skyline that I had worked so hard to conquer. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had bought that house with my own money, poured my nights into paying it off, and yet, somehow, it was now in my brother's name. And now, after all these months of silence, they had the audacity to blame me. I set my phone down on the marble countertop, the cool surface grounding me. My mind swirled with a storm of emotions: anger, disbelief, a pinch of bitter humor. The sting of betrayal lingered, but beneath it all, there was something else, a quiet, unwavering pride. I had survived this, built myself from scratch, and thrived, all while keeping my successes quietly tucked away from the people who had tried to diminish me. The smell of fresh espresso from the machine beside me mixed with the faint scent of my lavender candle, grounding me in the present. For a moment, I let myself feel the weight of what had been stolen, then I let it go. They thought they had power. I remember the day I first bought that house as clearly as if it happened yesterday. I was 26, proud, ambitious, and certain I was finally carving a space for myself in the world. The smell of fresh paint still lingered in the empty rooms, mingling with the faint sweetness of the new carpets. I ran my hand along the countertop in the kitchen, imagining dinner parties, laughter, and quiet mornings with coffee in hand. This was my sanctuary, my independence realized. And then came my parents' visit. They had arrived with smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes, with words that would shatter everything I thought was mine. "It's a nice house," my mother said, her tone clipped, "but we think it should be in your brother's name. He'll take better care of it." My chest tightened. My hands trembled so violently that I dropped the coffee mug I had been holding. The sharp crack as it hit the tile echoed in the empty house, mirroring the fracture inside me. "You what?" I managed, voice barely above a whisper, disbelief rooting me to the floor. The words didn't make sense, no matter how many times I repeated them in my head. This was my hard-earned dream, every mortgage payment, every late-night shift, every sacrifice I had made, and suddenly, it was being handed over to him as if it had never been mine. I felt a lump rise in my throat and fought back tears. I wanted to scream, to plead, to beg for fairness, but I had learned early on that fairness didn't always exist. The sting of being dismissed, the weight of being undervalued, pressed against me like a physical force. In the corner of the room, my grandmother's old vase caught my eye, a delicate heirloom she had once told me carried a simple message: "You hold the power to shape your own life, even when others refuse to see it." I touched the cool porcelain, letting her words sink deep into me. That day, I made a choice. I wouldn't beg for what was mine. I wouldn't let the people who claimed to love me dictate my worth. I would walk away, but not empty-handed. I would carry that resolve, that stubborn spark of independence, into everything I did from that moment forward. And I did. After that day, I left the house I had bought, leaving behind both the walls that were supposed to be mine and the people who had tried to take it. I poured all my energy into building a life that no one could touch, a life defined by my own hands, not theirs. The first few months were brutal. Endless hours at a small marketing firm, scraping by in a tiny apartment where the radiator groaned like an old, complaining friend. I learned to survive on instant noodles and late-night coffee runs, the aroma of caffeine becoming my closest companion as I chased the life I refused to let slip away. It was during those long nights that I met Mrs. Callahan, a seasoned executive who saw potential in me before I saw it in myself. She had the kind of calm authority that made people lean in, not out, and a smile that could put someone at ease even when the world was falling apart. "You've got grit, not just talent," she told me one evening after I stayed late to finish a pitch. Don't waste it proving them wrong. Prove it to yourself. That was the turning point. I realized that independence wasn't just about money or property. It was about control over my own destiny. I threw myself into work, learning the ropes, taking risks, and making mistakes that cost me sleepless nights and more than a few tears. I faced skepticism from clients, dismissive comments from colleagues, and the ever-present doubt whispering in my ear that maybe I wasn't cut out for this. But every small victory, landing my first big client, closing my first profitable campaign, seeing my savings account grow, was a reminder that I was building something no one could take from me. All the while, I kept my family in the dark. Social media was carefully curated, occasional photos of me smiling, travel updates that hinted at normalcy, but nothing that revealed the depth of my success. I didn't want them to know, not yet, not until I had proven to myself that I could rise above the betrayal, that I could thrive despite it. The city outside my apartment became my silent ally, the lights flickering like tiny affirmations that my life, my choices, my victories, were real and mine alone. There were nights when exhaustion threatened to swallow me, when the weight of responsibility and the lingering sting of betrayal seemed too heavy to bear. But every time I considered giving in, I remembered my grandmother's vase and the words etched in my memory, "You hold the power to shape your own life." I clung to them like a lifeline, letting them guide me through doubt, through struggle, through fear. By the time I was 30, I had a career that commanded respect, financial independence that no one could question, and a quiet satisfaction that the life I had built was fully, completely my own. And still, I kept it all hidden, nursing a private sense of triumph that they couldn't touch, because this time I was untouchable. The knock at my door was precise, deliberate. My parents stood there, my mother clutching her purse with a nervous tightness, my father's jaw set in that familiar stubborn line. Their expressions were a mixture of expectation and pity, as if they had rehearsed this moment, convinced they would find me struggling, defeated, a cautionary tale of wasted independence. I opened the door and gestured for them to come in. "Welcome," I said, my voice calm, smooth, the words carrying an authority they weren't used to hearing from me. They stepped inside, their eyes sweeping over my apartment as though it were a stranger's home. The space was a reflection of everything I had fought for: sleek, modern furniture, warm lighting that highlighted the carefully curated art, and personal touches that spoke of a life fully claimed, travel souvenirs, stacks of books with dog-eared pages, awards for my career, subtle nods to the path I had carved for myself. I watched their eyes flicker, registering surprise, curiosity, and the faintest trace of shame. My mother's hand trembled slightly as she touched the back of a velvet armchair. My father's gaze lingered on the framed certificate on the wall, the one recognizing my top sales achievement at work. I poured us all coffee, letting the rich aroma fill the room, giving them a moment to absorb the setting before I spoke again. "I imagine you're here because of the house," I said, measuring my words. They nodded, hesitant, waiting for me to continue. "The house you gave to my brother? The one I bought with my own money." Their eyes widened, and I let the pause stretch long enough for the weight of reality to settle. "Yes," I said, finally, "I bought that house. Every payment, every bill, every late night I worked was for that property. It was mine, but you decided to put it in his name. And when I stopped paying the mortgage because of that, you turned around and blamed me." I let them take it in. The silence was heavy, electric. My father's face reddened with guilt, my mother's mouth opened and closed without sound. I had expected denial, maybe even excuses, but all I saw was the raw, undeniable truth of their shock. "I have nothing to hide," I continued, my voice steady, a quiet power threading through every word. "I've built the life that is mine alone. Financial independence, career success, stability, things you never doubted you could take away, but couldn't. And now, you see me not as the child you think you can control, but as a woman who owns herself completely." I watched as they struggled to reconcile the girl they remembered with the woman standing before them. The room, my space, my choices. They all spoke louder than words ever could. They had expected vulnerability. Instead, they found strength, accomplishment, and a subtle, undeniable triumph that could not be ignored. For the first time, I saw them truly see me, not as their daughter to be corrected or blamed, but as a person who had endured, fought, and emerged victorious. The room was quiet after the reveal, heavy with the weight of their realization. I could see it in their eyes. The guilt, the disbelief, the dawning understanding that the child they had tried to control had outgrown them completely. I took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch just enough to remind them that the balance of power had shifted, and I was the one holding it now. "I'm willing to help," I said, letting my words hang in the air like a promise wrapped in authority. "But things will change. If we move forward, it will be on my terms, and you'll have to meet mine. No exceptions." My mother's lips parted, hesitant, as if testing whether this offer was real. My father nodded slowly, wary but attentive. "First," I began, "you must respect boundaries. That means no more demands, no more questioning my decisions, no more assuming you can manipulate outcomes in your favor. I am an adult, fully capable of managing my life, and I expect to be treated as such." I watched as the tension in their shoulders shifted slightly, the reality of my words settling in. "Second," I continued, "you each need to take responsibility for your own lives. My brother will receive his share, but that is his path, not yours. You cannot rely on me to fix what you've overlooked or ignored in your own lives. You must pursue your dreams, passions, and responsibilities without interference from the past." My voice softened just enough to convey compassion, but the firmness never wavered. "Third," I added, letting my grandmother's advice echo silently in my mind, "toxic patterns end here. Any lingering resentment, favoritism, or unfair expectations, those habits stop now. We rebuild, but we do so on honesty, respect, and shared growth." I saw their eyes shift downward, their faces reflecting an uncomfortable truth. They had been complicit in their own failures, and now it was time to confront them. I poured another round of coffee, the warm aroma filling the space, a small gesture of goodwill. "I care about our family," I said finally, "and I want relationships that are genuine. But care without boundaries is just another form of control. I am not that child anymore. I am the woman who has built her life brick by brick, and I will not let old patterns dictate my present or future." The power was no longer theoretical. It was tangible, visible in every confident gesture I made, every deliberate pause, every unflinching glance. For the first time, they were not just listening, they were learning, understanding, and perhaps beginning to respect the person I had become. By the time they left that evening, a subtle shift had occurred. I hadn't just reclaimed my life. I had reclaimed my voice, my authority, and my right to define the terms on which my family could be a part of it. I felt the weight of the past lift slightly, replaced with something steadier, firmer: control, clarity, and empowerment. Weeks passed, and slowly I began to notice changes. My parents called less to complain and more to ask advice, my father even sharing a tentative excitement about a personal project he had long ignored. My mother started volunteering at a local charity she had always spoken about but never pursued, her voice lighter when she spoke of it. They were learning, adapting, not perfectly, but enough for me to see that the dynamics had shifted in a meaningful way. I watched them from the quiet of my living room one evening, the city lights casting a soft glow over my apartment. I felt a sense of calm I hadn't known in years, a validation that my hard work, my choices, and my resilience had not been in vain. The house they had given to my brother no longer symbolized betrayal. It was a relic of the past, replaced by something far more significant: the life I had built and the respect I had earned. I reached for the small porcelain vase that my grandmother had left me, the one that had guided me through every moment of doubt and struggle. Its surface was cool and reassuring beneath my fingers. "You hold the power to shape your own life," I whispered softly, and I truly believed it now, not just for myself, but for everyone who had been caught in old patterns of expectation and blame. I realized that true independence was not just financial, it was emotional, mental, and spiritual. It was the ability to forgive without forgetting, to set boundaries without anger, and to embrace your own growth without resentment. I had become a woman who could love fiercely, protect fiercely, and still stand tall in the face of old wounds. As I gazed out at the skyline, I smiled, a quiet, confident curve of the lips that spoke of triumph and grace. I had endured betrayal, disappointment, and blame, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and free. The life I now owned, my career, my home, my choices, was proof that I was no longer defined by what others had taken or tried to control. And in that moment, I understood it fully. I am unstoppable. I am independent. I am whole. Bottom of form.